Laura!
Marisa!
What time is it?
It's Divine Mother Earth time!
Woohoo!
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Divine Mother Earth time. I am your co-host, Laura Eisenhower.
And I'm your other co-host, Marisa Acochello. Welcome, everybody. Well, today we have one of our most favorite people in the whole world, Shaun Stone, joining us again. And Shaun just completed a documentary, RFK Legacy, and it is really spectacular. The whole thing tells an incredible story. It's very revelatory. And I have to say, Shaun, it also looks beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, like the pacing and the typeface and the music,
Yeah,
the storytelling, the reveal is really great. So I'm
good.
just going to read a little bit about you. Shaun Christopher Ali Stone began his spiritual quest at 10 years old when his father took him to Tibet, Nepal, and India to illuminate the stark contrast between those worlds and Hollywood, where he had been a child actor in Oliver Stone films like JFK, The Doors, and Natural Born Killers. So I'm going to skip a little bit over here. You've had an incredible career. You've starred and directed in your first feature film, Greystone Park, based on your real life paranormal experiences in a haunted mental hospital. In 2020, he published the cosmic fairy tale Desiderata by Ali, now available from Blackstone and Audible. His most recent release is a poetry book, The Ephemeral Shades of Time. His poetry was turned into an album on iTunes and Spotify, Alien Spirit, featuring the music of Michel Huygen. Stone is a graduate of the Baron Brown Studio and has starred in multiple features, including Nightwalk, Union Bound, and Fury of the Fist and The Golden Fleece, which he also wrote. He has directed the documentaries A Century of War, Hollywood, DC, and Metahuman with Deepak Chopra. He also produced the documentary The Paradigm of Money about Wall Street corruption and collusion with the US government. I just love that you go for the jugular whenever you do something and you're all about the truth.
Mm-hmm. I guess.
Um, that,
I guess.
well, it seems that, well, from what I know of you,
Yeah, tell us about this project and working with your dad
yeah,
together and everything.
yeah, let's just go right for it, Shaun.
Hmm. What about it? What's the
What was
question?
it like and what was the process and how did it all kind of like come together?
It came together like most films come together in the sense that you have to start with an idea. You have a vision of what you want to do, and you start to put together a package and get investors involved. And thankfully, this process happened more swiftly than I would say, a lot of documentaries and films because it's always a question of, getting interest, right? And so when you have a topic like RFK, father and son, especially RFK Jr. at the time, who was running for president, and it was kind of like a hot topic, I think it made it a little bit easier. That's why we got it done in the whole process, the whole project, and I should say the process and the film all came together within about a year and a half. So that's actually relatively fast
Mhm.
for a film. I think it's because, again, it was kind of a hot topic at the time. But yeah, I mean, it came together just based on the fact of a vision meeting destiny, I guess you could say, because a lot of films and documentaries, they don't or they stall. It's difficult to get these things made.
Was it okay? So you worked with your father. Okay, he asked the questions, and it's just interesting to me that there's a parallel. It's RFK and RFK Jr., father and son, and it's you and your dad working together on this documentary. What was that like working with your dad?
I mean, I've worked with him a lot. Uh,
Hmm.
if you look at, obviously you just went through some of the bio. I mean,
The
Hmm.
doors and everything, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
well, I mean, yeah, I mean, I've worked with him since I was a
Good.
kid, acting in movies with him. I worked with him on Alexander, where I was doing the behind the scenes documentaries, and we made what, three short documentaries and a feature length documentary about the making of that film. I then worked with him on W, again, shooting the behind the scenes, and then in the editing room. Then I worked with him in the editing room further. Then I put him in my movie Greystone Park. So he and I have worked together a lot before. It's not like this is the first time. Yeah, I mean, I've directed him. I've acted for him. Obviously, we have a dynamic relationship where I think it's a pretty honest relationship in the sense that we can be straight with each other. And so, yeah, I mean, basically, his job on this case was to interview Bobby. We had a very limited window of time because Bobby was running for again, he was still running for, was he still running for, he was still running for president. He just got the Secret Service, so we had to deal with the whole Secret Service setup and that whole protocol of letting them inspect and get there before. And then basically we only had him for again like a very limited window of time. And thankfully my dad is very adept at interviewing people. I mean, he's done great, fantastic, fascinating documentaries and interviews with people like Castro and Hugo Chavez and Putin and countless others, right? World leaders. So, he think my dad basically, I gave him a list of questions, and ultimately, he would just kind of skip through because of time, like, okay, this is interesting. All right, this is not as interesting. Let's go here, and goes off his instincts. And so ultimately, yeah, I mean, that was essentially the task was to get as much juice, from the Bobby conversation, that was hopefully new to list people that watch it will find new information and new stories and things that get related through this film. So yeah, that was the job basically was you got basically 2 hours or maybe even less. Make the most of that of every minute so that ultimately you have enough material to really base the story around. And then obviously there's supporting interviews that we have with people like Dick Russell, the author, the fantastic researcher and author. Lisa Pease, a great researcher into the conspiracies of the RFK senior assassination. Who else? We got Dave Talbot, who's also a fantastic, legendary journalist and author, who's also done great work on the conspiracies to kill JFK. And anyway, there's obviously supporting interviews that you'll see in the film. Also, some of the moms that were affected by the vaccine damage to their kids, right? Who we see them and their stories and how they ended up working with Bobby at a different time. So yeah, it's a very epic piece, as you know.
How many layers do you feel like you had to kind of sift through? Because I mean, obviously there's a lot of cover stories. It's hard to, get to the truth when it comes to somebody's legacy. I know that all too well with Eisenhower. What was it like for you compiling this information? Did you find that there were a lot of contradictory stories that you had to discern, or was it pretty straightforward?
It's not so much I mean, it's not so much contradictory stories. It's more about focusing, the point of the documentary was focusing the narrative on what I felt was, the essence of, how do you say, of this kind of parallel between what is the parallel of RFK Jr. and the father. And so much of the media narrative had been that, especially during Bobby's run and really the last few years, I mean, Bobby Jr. as we know, been had character assassination ever since he started questioning vaccine safety back in the late 2000s. But it escalated post 2020 because of the COVID debacle and him being one of the most outspoken voices challenging Dr. Fauci, writing a book exposing, Fauci's real record. And then obviously, everything that he was doing with Children's Health Defense and his tweets and his speeches and everything, basically calling out the disaster of, not treating patients with things like ivermectin and masking is not effective to stop the transmission of COVID. The idea of lockdowns was insane. It was, damaging as we know, the economy, the long-term health of people had psychological impacts. It did so much damage, as we know. So he was really outspoken, and as we know, he was attacked for those positions. He was banned, from Facebook and whatever. It was with Facebook, or it was Facebook and Twitter. I mean, it was all these things that he was basically like banned for, and he he was hated by the mainstream narrative or the mainstream media. So when they said he's kind of this kook, who's not accepted by the Kennedys, right? I'm like, okay, great. Let's look at the real legacy of JFK and RFK, because it's a legacy of people that were challenging the status quo. And so I wanted to basically focus on the narrative around, again, these parallels of JFK and RFK challenging the military industrial complex, the CIA, uh,
Mm.
and probably JFK being killed for his positions, essentially not going along with, you name it, whether it's whether it's overthrowing Castro in Cuba or escalating to the war in Vietnam, all these things that he was resistant and reluctant to do and commit America to. I think that's why he was killed. And then RFK obviously was devastated by that. And we get into a lot of, the questions around what did RFK know? Because Talbot, who's a great researcher into the subject, really believes that RFK um, understood who was involved in killing his brother, that it was a conspiracy, and at the same time understood that the ramifications of being a critic of the Warren Commission, or being outspoken in that regard, would have destroyed his political career. He would have looked like a lunatic, right? So he held his tongue, and he basically, went into politics. He became a senator, and he had a plan to want to to become president, especially on a platform that was running against the Vietnam War. And he arguably died for these reasons, essentially, to carry on the legacy of his brother. And then we show that, RFK Jr. picks up, where his uncle and his father left off. And, essentially, rather than getting into politics, he goes into the environment, and he tries to clean up the environment, and he goes against these big corporations, and all that's well and good until he starts questioning, things like vaccine safety, challenging Monsanto, in winning that big case, obviously in 2019, and then COVID, like all these major issues that essentially you're not, there's certain things that you're allowed to question, there are things you're not allowed to question, right? We see it all the time. It's like, you name it, you can question all kinds of things when it comes to our government. When it comes to our relationship with Israel, you can't question that. Or when it comes to the war in Ukraine, you can't question that. That's like, these are the things that the status quo wants to hold.
I
And so,
think that's
yeah.
I think that's one of the reasons why, well, maybe it is, well, I would ask you, is that one of the reasons why you picked this documentary to direct? Because you and your father do question those, you ask those questions. I mean, I've seen it on social media. And so I just find that very interesting that, you're very outspoken and you ask questions, and so does Bobby. So to me, that layer is very compelling in this documentary. I also thought it was very interesting that your father he asks the first question about the Kennedy curse. And I really love that, because then
Mhm.
Bobby says, is it a gene in my family that's disposed in my family taking risks? And I just think it's also fascinating to me that, here's, both JFK and RFK were assassinated, and now Bobby's being assassinated in the media for every time he opens his mouth. I just read that influencers are paid like $1,000 a post just to discredit him. So
I'm not surprised, right?
I'm not surprised, right? Not at all. So I guess it's like this fearlessness of putting the truth out there and being such an advocate for humanity that it really gets him in trouble, because, like you both know, there is the military industrial complex, the deep state, that is doing everything they possibly can to squelch them. And you and your great grandfather, Laura. So, I mean, what do you think? Do you think that that How do you think that, are you optimistic that Bobby's going to be successful in what he's doing? It seems that he is now, but there's still a lot of pushback. I mean, what do you think about where things are going at the moment?
I mean, it's difficult to know. Uh,
Hmm.
I mean, certainly the thing is this, generally speaking, I would say he's a truth seeker. And that's the point is that um, when it comes to like questioning things, it's just a question. The question itself is where does your curiosity end? Are you
Hmm.
actually looking for information, for facts, for evidence, or are you just happy to sit with your ideology, right? And most people, I think, would say they just want to stay within their ideology. So it's whatever it may be. It's your religious belief. Um, it's your political party. It's your, you name it, your allegiance to some, to your company. As they say, you can't change the mind of someone who's literally their paycheck, is to believe a certain thing, right? So if you're getting paid by you know, a, from the medical business, if you're being paid as a doctor, of course, how are you going to question the essence of what you've been trained to do and how where your income and everything, your livelihood comes from. Same with a lawyer, same with an accountant, same with you name it, right? Anyone who's
Hmm.
in the world of business is basically tied to the system. And so it's very rare for people who are the system breakers and the outside thinkers, right? They don't normally, they're the ones that come and they change things and they actually do, sometimes they succeed, sometimes it's not ready yet. The consciousness is not ready yet and they get martyred or they get ignored. And then it takes, decades to break through. Um, Obviously, JFK and RFK, they didn't succeed. They succeeded in giving us glimpses of an ideal of leadership, but they didn't succeed. They both were struck down. We continued on with with the war in Vietnam, and yeah, I mean, look, so you say like, well, RFK Jr. has been kind of crusading on environmental issues. Our environment's still decimated. We still have, so much toxin, so many problems. He certainly will not stop as long as he's alive. I'm sure he's going to continue, whether it's through this administration into another one or whatever he does, he will continue. But getting there, I don't know. I mean, it takes a collective shift in consciousness, and that's what, I think we're witnessing and being a part of is this great divide between those that literally sit there and watch mainstream news and parrot those talking points and say, "Oh, this guy is so crazy." I mean, it's like, why didn't you talk, what, Sean, why didn't you talk about the brainworm? Why don't you talk about him leaving a dead bear in Central Park? It's like, because it's not about that.
Yeah, that's such a stupid
This
question.
documentary, this documentary isn't about that. It's about, it's not it's about showing examples of leadership and courage,
Mm,
in the face of, a system that doesn't want to change. And it's very difficult. And of course, JFK, RFK Jr. are flawed people. They're not perfect people, but that's the problem is that we're in a world where the media wants to like glorify or demonize. And it's
mm,
like it's not human anymore. We're not a
hmm.
world of humans. We're in a world of complete exaggeration, of such excess of portrayal, right? Where it's like, they portray Obama like Superman and they portray, Biden as like this like, savior of America from Trump, and Trump is this monster like that, can do no right. It's just we have become, and people actually accept that. That's the scary part. You know,
Hmm.
ultimately these are that these are people that are flawed, every one of them, and some greater flaws, absolutely. They're just like anything. It's like, and you go to a prison, it's like, hey, guy's the rapist and the murderer, and that's the serial killer, and this is the guy, that's busted for marijuana. I mean, there's different degrees, right, of
Hmm.
problems in our world. And I think the problem is we are in a world where the media has completely lost perspective of reality and they have their own agenda to it. I mean, who owns media? It's like you could say the military industrial complex. Certainly it's a corporate elite. It's certainly big pharma has huge amounts of ad revenue going to all their news programs, and you see it all the time, brought to you by Pfizer. Um, and Bobby's part of Bobby's point in his last book was look at how much big pharma is connected to the military industrial complex. We don't really get too much into the film, but we kind of hint at it because we
Hmm.
tell you in the story, we go look at Monsanto. Monsanto's job was creating chemicals for things like, Agent Orange for us to use in Vietnam, to deploy in Vietnam. So you don't think there's a deep relationship between big agriculture, big pharma, and in our military industrial complex and our whole chemical and biological warfare that we conduct? Of course there is. That's why during COVID, the whole
Hmm.
thing was run from the Department of Defense, the mRNA uh, vaccine program, right? It was
Yeah.
sponsored by the DoD. So
Hmm.
it's not like Pfizer's out here and our government is here. No, our government is overseeing everything in this country.
Yeah.
All of the corporations are ultimately, I mean, look at, even Elon, even, Bezos, all those guys, huge government contracts.
Yeah,
You're not,
interplanetary corporate conglomerate. I mean, we did not win the Second World War. It's been this infiltration that has socially engineered humans to really also be pit against each other and not
yeah,
and not, yeah, recognize these things that you're calling out. So
yeah.
yeah. Where did you do most of the shooting? Like what was the experience like with the
Right. Um, so we did so Bobby was living here in LA, right, at the time. He was our neighbor, my dad's neighbor, I should say, here in West LA, but now he's DC based. So we did some interviews here, and then we did New York City, I think was the only other location. LA and New York because the majority of the people, thankfully, were based, in one of those two cities, or we had to bring them, for interviews. But remember, I mean, this is only for interview purposes that we, had to travel to capture, these people on camera. A lot of this footage, the 95% of this movie, I don't know, 95% is stock footage. And we were really lucky to have some great researchers and people that are close to the Kennedy family, so they can actually help us find, these amazing photos and home video footage of, RFK talking about his trip with his family, right? The father talking about his trip with the family, and he's saying, Bobby here caught a rattlesnake or something, and it's like, what a great little home video moment of their one of their rafting trips, I think. So yeah, we were very, we had really good research support and assistance to source all this amazing footage, and that's what you see in this film is that yeah, we did have we have a great DP that made the interviews look good, but we found such amazing stock footage that it really just becomes this journey that the editor was able to create a collage, an emotional collage and mood as we go back and forth across time.
I really love that because when you really feel the documentary through RFK Jr.'s eyes. The shots of him as a young boy.
Yeah,
I loved that. And you get a glimpse into, what his life was about, what he was feeling, and what his family was like. And I just thought, it was very you were in the movie, you were in
yeah.
the documentary.
Yeah, no, the Kurt Matila is the editor. He did a really wonderful job of shaping this based on
Mhm.
like, had a concept of, an outline of, hey, this is how we're going to parallel these two journeys and go back and forth across time structurally. And then based on that structure, he really just started diving into the footage and he was like, let's make sure that it feels like we're always looking at this from RFK Jr.'s perspective, right? From the moment
Yeah.
the film starts and he's looking at his father announcing his run for the presidency in 68. Like from that moment forward, you understand that it's like this is RFK Jr.'s perspective on how he's carrying on the legacy. But obviously it's, I'm interpreting it. But as he's been happy with the result. I mean, I think he's reflected to me and others, that just how moved he was by it.
It is very moving, and I even love the timeline you put in
Yeah.
the Yeah, that was so cool because it really grounded the viewer as to where you were in the story.
That's right. That's right. We needed that, how do you say? It's got a Godfather 2 quality to it, right? Godfather 2 was that whole father-son journey where it's Al, Al is the older, Michael Corleone, and
Mhm.
he's living his life, and then they're cutting back to the father, the Robert De Niro is like, the younger version of the father and they're both having this parallel story of their rise and fall. And um, yeah, I think the timeline was helpful for people to understand how we're bouncing across time, but ultimately time doesn't exist. Here's RFK Senior's passed away, but when I watch the film, I feel like, hey, he's right here, he's alive, and every word and every gesture, it's like, you know, the ghosts live.
Yeah, I feel that big time. My gosh. Yeah. What a process that's underway on the planet. But now on YouTube, channels are coming back. There's so much exposure of just the
Yeah.
hidden layers of what's been happening. The the dark cabal, Illuminati kind of inversion of our world is being brought to the light.
I
What
hope.
yeah. What are you witnessing? What does it feel like being in that part of the world? Are you noticing just a whole kind of people coming forward, being willing to tell
Yeah.
stories, and it's like a domino effect, or
I don't know. I think, you know, f- people like us that have been at this for a long time, um, I think there was a lot of excitement in like the post 2020 age of the Great Awakening, and thankfully, obviously, we shifted out of that totalitarian time frame that was like 2020, 2021, into 22. It was just so heavy, and it certainly has felt better, since okay, we shifted out of that, and then then the Trump election I think was very hopeful, and a lot of us I think feel very disappointed that it's more business as usual. It's a lot more, the same kind of. We haven't gotten into a war yet, but we certainly haven't really seen the peacemaking that was promised. And there's still the threats of more, war with Venezuela and others. And it's a little disheartening. I feel that um, I think there was a lot of optimism, and some people reflected like, hey, they were optimistic about Obama, which I wasn't, but I
Never.
I knew what he was. But I think I did feel more optimism for our country this, in this time frame, and it's felt just stalled. I don't know, like a lot of the economic shifts that we've have talked about, the new quantum financial system, some kind of uh, uh, some kind of jubilee when it comes to this insane debt. I think we're still feeling it. Obviously, it's reflected a lot by young people talking about the inflation and the impact of inflation on the livelihood of most young people. It's a real thing, and so there is, I think there is concern that if Trump is actually working to do this transition that has been talked about, the kind of Q military operation, or whether that really was just a psyop and it's just going to be more of the same.
I really hope that wasn't just a psyop. I mean, you hear the white hats are winning, and then you hear about digital ID and digital currency.
Hmm.
So I just I echo your concerns, and then about the Epstein files, and I mean I just think that I mean, and Laura, you say this all the time that we are the ones we've been waiting for. That it's really at this point we have to start speaking out, and like David Icke says, everything ends when you say no,
Yeah.
basically. So do you think I'm okay? Do you think that we will come out of this in a better place or and I'm thinking about like how the rise and fall of JFK, the rise and fall of RFK, and now the rise is RFK Jr. going to have a rise and a rise?
Yeah.
And I think we will rise, humanity will rise.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, a lot of people are saying, this is what I hear all the time. Oh, RFK Jr. is gonna, he's basically losing his support because he's with this administration. And I'm like, I mean, okay, if you want to say that, but this administration won on on a certain promise, and a lot of people were excited for it. I mean, Trump won the popular vote for like the first Republican to do so, I guess, since what? Did Bush ever win a popular vote? I don't know if he won the second time, maybe,
I
but
don't know.
this like winning all the swing states and everything, it felt more like the Reagan era, right? And so it was a lot of enthusiasm for, and what I find interesting is like, MAGA's MAGA. MAGA's, I appreciate a lot of what MAGA's doing and standing for, and they're criticizing Trump. They're saying, look, I'm not with, I'm not with you on this, Israel first kind of mentality and all this, going and kissing the wall kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
so I like that MAGA's like, hey, we're here regardless. And I feel like, RFK Jr. is, look, maybe not on some of his foreign policy stuff. Definitely, I've debated him. We sat down and argued about some of this stuff, about you know, around Israel. But as far as health and wanting the best for our environment and for our children to have like a clean and healthy future, absolutely. I think he's gonna do his best against a machine that as we talked about, has been entrenched for forever. And basically, I think he will have support coming, whatever happens with this administration. I think that a lot of people admire his courage and appreciate the fact that he was willing to, join Trump because it was his best opportunity to get into a position where he could make a change.
Mhm.
Wasn't playing politics and saying, "Well, I'm not a Republican, so I won't go with you." I mean, that's silly, right?
So
He made
silly.
sure to both parties, and Kamala and the Democrats snubbed him. So, yeah, I think he did. He rode the wave of enthusiasm, and he'll do his best. And look, I mean, we don't know what's going to happen. We're still a long way from 28. I mean, so much is hopefully going to change in our country in these next 3 years. I know something has to give
Yeah.
because
Mhm.
whether or not you know what I said, whether or not Trump is compromised, or whether or not we've got the deep state really still running things, um, eventually reality hits.
Yeah.
And reality is, a debt that's going on $40 trillion, and an inflation that young people can't afford, the costs of living and owning a home, in this kind of inflationary environment. And, wars like Russia and Ukraine that can't go on forever, and at some point either will de-escalate or escalate into a greater conflict. So it's like you get certain realities, and that's what I appreciate about this world, is that
Yeah.
Mhm.
eventually, you can, like Mike Tyson always said, you can plan all you want, but eventually you get punched in the face. And that's what's going to make the difference, is how you respond when reality
Mhm.
strikes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And one of the big things too, and I'm really glad to hear Anya Wick out there, Epstein's niece, speaking about so much, and revealing so much about just the blackmail. I mean, that's really what hooks people in. Um, well-intentioned people that have witnessed all sorts of things and have
Yeah.
been compromised
Right.
against their will,
Yeah.
forced into doing something or participating in something that they have footage of that could incriminate them later. But if, we could understand that as a humanity, um, and not ostracize or not, go on the attack, and
Mhm.
and understand, what they're up against, and how the deep state kind of ties their hands and makes it difficult for them to do the right thing. We can help them to.
How about amnesty?
Yeah,
It's almost
exactly.
like if you want truth and reconciliation, I mean, South Africa was a great model for that, right? I mean, essentially they were saying, look, we'll have Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Well, we'll give amnesty, come and testify. And I think that amnesty should be to a certain extent. I'm not someone that believes in amnesty for all. I think that there are those, that are the true manipulators, and they've been perpetuating evil for a long time, and they get no quarter. But I think for those that were sucked in and,
Yeah.
can just turn state's evidence and, become witness, give them amnesty.
Right. Right. Knowing the difference between the ones that are forcing this upon people versus those that are victimized by it and controlled by it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was looking at your Instagram, Shaun, and you were again talking about the divine male, right? And it seems the last time we spoke, things were very different for the in terms of the sexes. And now we've seen, the divine male again rise up, especially with this last administration. And I kind of really like the way where things are much more now between men and women. How do you feel about where things are at this point with men and women? Just as an aside.
I don't know where things are between men and women. What I
I mean,
do
like the divine male thing, like you were talking about
I
that.
think we
know,
have to wait.
yeah, what I was talking about is I think that there's an overall
Mhm.
sentiment that the masculine is tied up with this patriarchy concept. When I say, look, patriarchy is just it's a debt slave system. It's like, hey, pay the Lord your dues,
Mhm.
right? It's goes back, you could say it's biblical in the sense, this masculine God, right? And not
Right.
honor God as equally, right?
Hmm.
As this yin yang that we need both energies. And so because of so much anger and resentment, I mean, all this like no kings kind of thing, um,
Ridiculous.
it's psychologically and spiritually, it's like it's denouncing the divine masculine, which is the king.
Hmm.
And I think there is, I feel that there's just a little bit too much resentment against the male, and as a result, the men have hidden. It's like I used to have this argument all the time with a former partner, and she'd talk about like the suffering that women have gone through, and I'm like, yeah, but do you know how many men have been sent off to wars and sacrificed?
I agree with you. I
There's
agree
how
with
many men
you.
have been put through as well. Young men have been sacrificed, for this, as I say, for the sins of the father. It's like the sons have been scapegoated, have been, sent off, have been forced to arm or have been forced to, to suffer. And so it's not this like, women are suffering and men aren't. It's like kind of like with the politics thing. It's like, well, women's voices have been silenced. I'm like, do you understand like in a relationship how strong women's voices are in a man's heart and a man's mind? I mean, it's not always being public. That doesn't mean, being public doesn't mean you have an impact. It's
Mhm.
oftentimes being private where you have the biggest impact, as we know.
Yeah, it's
So,
Yeah.
back to it's just there can't be generalizations and stereotypes.
yeah.
It's a
So,
huge process of both that have been. I mean, the targeting of the sacred union, hierogamic union, this has not been modeled to us. It was targeted on the planetary grid network and how that all connects, into the Michael Mary lines. This is where the dark reversal grid technology was placed so that, we'd be in this imbalance. Both
mm,
sides have to heal and come together and see, you know, what the wounds are. And
yeah.
Also, you know what? Building on that, it's like male versus female, Democrat versus Republican,
it's
black versus white.
integrate,
It is
integrate. Come on,
ridiculous. It's like
integrate.
I know it's like putting us against each other, when we're not recognizing who the real problem is. I mean, as
Trauma,
long as we fight
trauma.
each other,
The real problem is in ourselves, though, because
okay.
I say that because we accept things that we should not accept.
Ah,
That's why I like to
true.
say we win the war on consciousness from within. We win the war from within. It's a war on our minds, on our, you gotta,
Yeah,
Yeah, we
it is
culture
a spiritual
or
battle. Yeah.
politically, as a people, we accept things that we should not accept,
and
and
consent
that's
and accept it. Exactly.
so,
This
and that's
Yeah.
dependence bond got to be broken.
Yeah, but fight battles that really don't really mean anything a lot of times.
mm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just so back to the divine masculine. It was just saying, the divine masculine has to rise from this shadow masculine, from the shadow, the broken, the heartbroken, the armored, right? The dark male, like into the divine again, and
Mhm.
that's not a threat to women at all. It's not a threat to the feminine at all. It's able to, how do you say, the heart of a man can hold the world, because the world is the woman, the earth is the woman.
Right. The Sophia goddess who became Mother Earth. So I really love that because that's the only way humanity is ever gonna, I mean, really rise. And I just think women are better when men are stronger.
Yes, of
Anyway,
course.
yeah. It's
We
like
want
I
to
want a
return.
strong.
Yeah.
I love strong men.
The
And
Christos Sophia, the Guinevere and Arthur, and it doesn't, I mean, it doesn't have to be limited to an archetypal imprint. It's just authenticity of just being true to yourself,
Yeah.
just doing that ancestral clearing and realizing this is the greater work. This is the work. That's how we de-weaponize the weapons.
Yeah.
It's just harvesting and siphoning our dreams because of our fractures. It can get in, and these unresolved fractures make us breeding ground for all sorts of theft from our our ability to write the script of the future. And this is what I love about you as a filmmaker and you as an artist, that you're a powerful script writer. You use this art to influence the minds of humanity for the betterment of humanity, to help steer us on a timeline that is our birthright, that is much more organic and true to ourselves, which creates rapid healing when we're in alignment with that, right? So appreciate that and all your work. What other projects do you have coming up?
That's the mystery. This year has been a very snake-like year. So, you're the snake in the Chinese sense. So, I don't know yet. We'll see what the universe aligns. As I said, the vision is there, but the universe has to consent and say, yes, this is what we want for you.
And that alignment is so beautiful, because that is answering to a deeper calling, and you work for God, you work for Mother Earth, you work for the soul-centered approach to living, which is ascension
Mm.
and the restoration of that divine masculine and feminine. So yeah, we love having you as a guest, and thank you for being with us today. Is there anything, any final words from either of you, anything we haven't covered that you want to make sure we say before we go? Where can we find this movie? Like where is it being?
Everywhere. It's on Prime, and if you use like Amazon Prime or Apple, Fandango, if you type RFK Legacy, you'll find it. Angel Studios released it, so it's on their platform as well. But I think Amazon Prime is probably the easiest for most people to access. And I don't know if you put my website, shaunstone.info, but that's a really convenient place for people to, check out my work.
Excellent. You've been working so hard for so long, and all your beautiful creations are so deeply appreciated by so many of us. We really love you. Thanks for joining us.
We do. And, all your interviews have been so great, and your voice is just so important and so powerful. So just thank you for everything you've done, and keep doing. And we'd love to have you back on again soon.
I appreciate that. Thank you both, really.
Shaun.
Bye, everybody. Another great episode of Divine Mother Earth Time.